Hi, this is Richard Kinky Friedman, and you are listening to the podcast Fascination Street.
I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Evan Stern. Evan Stern is the host of my new favorite podcast, Vanishing Postcards. Vanishing Postcards focuses on out-of-the-way places and the out-of-the-ordinary people that inhabit them. In this episode, we get to know Evan. We talk about where he was born and raised, what took him to the big city, and why he wanted to come all the way back to Texas to start a podcast. Also, why a podcast? And then we talk about, you guessed it, Vanishing Postcards. I wasn't kidding in this episode when I say that I am subscribed and I have listened to every single episode. It is my new favorite episode. It's easily digestible. It's a lot of fun. And you know I love fascinating stories and people. And this is that. If you like my show, I think you'll like his show. It's a little shorter, so it's a little more digestible. It's very well produced. And he spends a lot of time on each episode getting it right. He's a natural storyteller, as you'll hear. This is my conversation with the host of the Vanishing Postcards podcast, Evan Stern.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street podcast, Evan Stern. How are you doing today, Evan?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. So, Streetwalkers, you guys all know my passion for the podcast Gone Cold Texas True Crime. I was listening to that, as I do every week, and I heard, I guess, sort of an ad for this other podcast called Vanishing Postcards. And I was like, well, this ad sounds intriguing. I love Texas. It's about small, hard-to-find things in Texas that might not be around too much longer. Maybe I should check this out. And so I did. I subscribed. And then lo and behold, that's my guest today, Evan Stern. We are going to get to know you, my dude. First of all, before we get into why you are so passionate about Texas and the hard-to-find things therein, where are you born and raised, man? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
So I am one of a proud few who can claim to have been born, bred, and buttered in the city of Austin, Texas. I think I've heard that people have taken to calling people like me unicorns nowadays. But if you hear some sirens in the background right now, in fact, I think I hear some action going on. I'm actually talking to you today from my apartment in New York City.
New York City,
get a rope. Get a rope. Yeah, man. I've lived here long enough. I have earned the right to call myself a New Yorker for whenever I am in the mood to do so. But I will proudly tell everyone that I am bicultural. I am Texas, New York, which means I really do get to borrow the best of both worlds. And I love Texas, and I try to make it back as often as I can, believe me.
So you grew up in Austin. Are you one generation Austin, two generations Austin? Did you guys come over on the Mayflower and land in Austin? What happened?
My parents are from South Texas. Mom grew up in Corpus Christi, and my dad grew up in a small town outside of Corpus called Robstown.
Those listening, Selena is also from Corpus Christi, and so is Whataburger. What did you want to be when you grew up, man?
I wanted to be an actor for as long as I can remember. In fact, my dad will tell you that he built a stage in our backyard so that I could perform, so that I would have a place to channel my energy. Performing is something that I continue to do to this day. Performing is what brought me to New York. I came up here for studies and I ended up staying. Most of the work that I've done in the city has actually been as a singer more than anything else. I've been privileged enough to have performed on the stages of Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center. I've also performed in a number of plays regionally. But as you referenced at the start of the show, basically the last year of my life has been consumed with this podcast, Vanishing Postcards. And had you told me 2-3 years ago that this was something that would be taking up most of my time and energy, I don't know how I would have reacted. But when I look at my body of work as a whole, I think that this very well might be the best work I have ever had a hand in creating. On the surface, in some ways, it is a 180 from much of my performance work and everything I've done up until this point. At the same time, I think that all of that really kind of beautifully prepared me to take this leap and journey I've been on.
So first of all, that's a lot to unpack. One, I hate your father. Two, that is not fair that you had the kind of dad who built you an effing stage. That's pretty uncool, Dad Stern. Wait, is your dad Daniel Stern?
Chuck.
Oh, yeah. I don't like you, Chuck. Not cool, man. Actually, it's way cool and unfair cool. I don't like your dad. And then the next thing was, oh, you sing.
I do.
Hit it. What kind of stuff do you sing and why?
Well, I have always been drawn to what would be called popular standards. I have a great passion and love for what is known as the Great American Songbook, Cole Porter, Johnny Mercer in particular. I attribute that to really my grandmother. Growing up, riding around in the backseat of her car, she was always playing, Glenn Miller, the music of the 40s. And it really had a great impact on me. I think a lot of that might be because to the ears of a child, there's something that's very comforting and soothing about that music. I mean, you think about the times during which that music was created, the Depression, World War II. I think it has a wonderful comforting quality, and it's just something that's always stuck with me. When you listen to music from that era, there's great romance to it. We live in an era right now where there really isn't much in the way of romance. And there are a lot of reasons for that, not all of them bad, but I think that kind of gentleness is something that's always spoken to me. And so really the first thing that I did when I moved to the city, I realized that no doors were going to open for me. And I had to do something on my own. And I initially thought to myself, well, let me write and perform a one-man show. And I realized
because that's what people do.
That is
people
absolutely.
Are like, hey, you know what? This is a tough city. You know what I should do? The hardest fucking thing possible.
Well, that's exactly right. Because I realized that in order to create a piece that I myself would be interested in sitting through, it was going to take way more long than I had the patience to deal with. And I, sat back and I thought to myself, well, in cabaret, the history is there, songs are there. I can put together a show. I can sing, I can tell some stories. Let me put together a show in the cabaret realm. And the first thing that I did is I put together a show that focused on the songs of World War II. And I was fortunate enough to get a lot of good press out of that. And it really opened up the doors for, just kind of an incredible journey in the cabaret world that I've enjoyed for many years. At the same time, I think that concept of storytelling that I learned in piecing together the shows that I've created in that realm, I find myself applying to Vanishing Postcards as well.
Interesting. Back to the music of the 30s and 40s in that era. You mentioned that the music of that time has great romance. And for most of the people listening, I'm going to say they're not too familiar with that genre of music or that era. I personally am a huge Francophile. I love Frank Sinatra. And I have something like 200 of his vinyl records. I've got almost every movie he's made. I got pictures and posters, and I even have a sheet of stamps when they issued those for Frank Sinatra Stamp Day or whatever. I've been to Hoboken. I went to the Frank Sinatra post office in Hoboken. I went to the houses he lived in Hoboken. There's even a star. It's reminiscent of the Hollywood Walk of Fame style stars, except it's blue and has a microphone. And it's on the ground in the house, where the house used to be, where he was born, but that house burned down and they never rebuilt it. So there's just, in the middle of nowhere, there's just this star. Like, I love Frank Sinatra. And so back to the great romance of those musics and those songs. Kids listening, it's not just romance between a man and a woman that they sing about. They sing about romance of country, romance of travel. Hell, there's even a song where Frank Sinatra sings about how much he loves drinking coffee in Brazil. I mean, it's not just your typical boy-girl romance or love romance. It is a romance of all things, of people, of cultures, of country, of food, of travel. It's such a magical and wonderful era of music. So, Evan, I agree with you. I love it. And those listening, if you haven't checked out some of that stuff, go do it. It'll change your life.
Beautifully said, my friend. Beautifully said indeed.
Thank you. So why New York? You said that you went to New York because you wanted to be a performer. Oh, no, you said you went to New York for studies. Does that mean you went to Tisch?
No,
What a loser. No Tisch.
I know, right?
And
Please,
this is over.
My SAT scores weren't good enough to get into Tisch. I looked at Tisch. I ended up going to Sarah Lawrence, which is a small liberal arts college just outside of the city. It's really just about a half-hour train ride outside of Grand Central Terminal. And in retrospect, I'm really grateful that it ended up that way. I was able to get a great broad-based education while I was there. I was close enough to the city, but I still had that kind of campus college experience. It was easier to focus on your studies, but you are put into more of a community situation when you're in an environment like that. Made great friends, partied. But again, I think that the benefit of where I went was that I did get a broad-based education and I learned how to think independently. I learned how to create independently, which isn't necessarily something that you're going to get if you're doing that good, rigorous conservatory training, which has its place as well. But I think that the reason I've been able to survive and endure for as long as I have is because I do have a broad base of interests that have helped keep me sane when times in the business have been pretty tough.
Nice. I've talked to a lot of people who went to Tisch, and there's some pretty big holes in the games that they teach up there. There's a lot they don't teach that they probably should. They teach the art part of arts, but they don't teach any of the business part of arts, which I feel is detrimental. Just wild example. Let's just take acting. A typical actor will audition for 9 months of the year, get lucky, and work for 3 months of the year. But there's nowhere in Tisch, at least to the people that I've spoken to, that explain anything about that and that maybe you're going to want to save that money for the next 9 months that you're not working.
Well, believe me, they didn't touch on any of that at Sarah Lawrence.
Oh, good.
As well.
Good.
They
okay, good.
really didn't. So believe
That's awesome.
me.
That's fantastic. After school, why did you stay in New York? Why didn't you come back home? I mean, there's plenty of artsy fartsy shit to do in Austin.
The thing of it is there's just great possibility that exists in New York. There's just terrific stimulation that you find in the theater here. You know, there are people that you meet here, people that you're surrounded by, opportunities that you get here that you're just not going to find anyplace else. New York is a very, very hard place to live, but the rewards really are extraordinary. In addition to which, I really just kind of fell in love over the years with city life. I mean, being able to walk everywhere is absolutely extraordinary.
Do you even own a car?
I do not.
That's cheap. That's cheaper.
Well, yeah, in fact, after the rent, not so much, but there is that.
Well, see, if you had a car, you couldn't afford rent. My wife and I have been to New York 4 or 5 times. And because it's so freaking expensive, we stay in Rahway, New Jersey. And then we just drive into the city. Amazing pizza in New Jersey, by the way. But I don't think we've ever driven in New York. You know, we take the train in and then we just Uber everywhere or walk or whatever. So I can totally understand how living in New York, you probably wouldn't need a car, which is not like any town in Texas unless you live where you work. What kinds of things? I know you did a one-man show. I'm assuming you've done some other things.
Sure. Absolutely.
What did you do? I mean, I didn't see you in Hamilton.
No.
So you weren't in that. I didn't see you in School of Rock, so you weren't in that.
In addition to that, I also did a show that focused on the songs of the Prohibition years. A few years ago as well, I had the honor of performing a solo show at Lincoln Center that was centered on the songs of Johnny Mercer's South.
Why? How did that happen?
If I were to name a favorite lyricist, it's Johnny Mercer. And when you look at the pantheon of the great writers...
Wait, hold on 1 second. Name a favorite lyricist.
Johnny Mercer.
Okay, go ahead.
I
just wanted to see if you were telling the truth. You said if you had to, you would. So I just want to make sure you would.
There you go. No, so when you look at the pantheon of great writers of the American songbook, Johnny Mercer is unique. And I guarantee you've heard Johnny Mercer songs before. He did Blues in the Night, Moon River, Accentuate the Positive. It's just an incredible body of work. Goody, goody, Jeepers Creepers. And he's unique among American lyricists because most of the great ones, Irving Berlin, Gershwin, were all ethnic New York City, predominantly Jewish writers. Johnny Mercer was this really patrician guy from Savannah, Georgia. So first of all, there's this incredible outdoor nature imagery that you're going to find in his lyrics. Skylark, for instance. His work also has tremendous use of vernacular that you don't find in the other lyricists. So I really wanted to take a look at how the American South influenced his work. That show completely focused on that. And that was an incredibly rewarding experience. And a few years ago as well, I had the honor of performing on the bill of a concert that was dedicated to the composer Jimmy Van Heusen, who was one of Sinatra's great collaborators. He wrote Come Fly With Me, many, many great songs. That's some other examples. And I've done plenty of work, too, that no one has seen and never will see as well. You know, your readings in your off-Broadway spaces.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Welcome to the Player Series. I'm Gary Player, and throughout the series, we're going to take you through incredible stories, conversations with legends and current players, perspectives on current events in and around golf, and much more. Don't forget to subscribe to the Player Series on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast.
Let's get back into it.
So you're primarily doing, I hope this is not offensive, off Broadway black box kind of theater things?
Oh, sure. I've done plenty of that.
Nice. Okay, hit it. I'm going to keep asking.
I know.
What's your favorite song to sing?
My favorite song is probably A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square.
To sing? That's your favorite one to sing?
Probably. That's a tough call.
I ask the tough questions. That's what I'm known for.
It's that or I'm old-fashioned. I mean, I think that I'm old-fashioned is almost autobiographical. So I love that
thought you were
song.
actually saying you like it because you're old-fashioned. I'll go with either answer. That's fine.
Yeah, so one and the same. But I love A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square as well. That's another great song from the war years. And when I went to London for my studies, I spent my junior year studying abroad in London. Berkeley Square was the first place I had to visit because of that song.
Sure, that makes sense. Did you hit all the other highlights? Did you hit Abbey Road and
in between the pub crawls?
Nice. Very well done, sir. So, Evan, what do you want to be now when you grow up? I know that you wanted to be an actor when you grew up when you were a little kid, but you're not a little kid anymore, man. You're going to still be an actor? You're still going to keep doing what you're doing? Is it working?
Always. What I can say, when I was a junior in high school, our history teacher had us write letters to ourselves. And he said, in 10 years from now,
your history teacher was an asshole.
He said, 10 years from now, I'm going to send you this letter. He held true to that. And so I remember when I was like 27, I got this letter and I read it. I viewed it as a letter from someone else. Some of it certainly made me blush.
Kind of was a letter from someone else.
It absolutely was because, my 16, 17-year-old self was different than, 26, 27-year-old me. But I was able to read that letter and say, you know what? I've stayed true to what I wanted to do. And it hasn't always been easy. There's a lot to be frustrated about. Am I where I'd like to be? Maybe not. But what I gathered from that is that if that kid were to see where I am today, that kid would probably think I was pretty cool.
So you're saying that 17-year-olds think you're cool. I'm sure that when you were reading that letter from your past self, you were probably like, how the fuck did I know what a podcast was back then? No, maybe not. But I want to talk about your podcast now. So, Evan, you live in New York. You are a performer. COVID has really ruined that for you, I'm sure. If part of what you do is perform in front of other people, then I'm sure it's ruined that for you. I bring that up to ask you this. Why podcasting?
Well, I'm one of those people who just fell in love with podcasting and the audio medium over the last 10 years. I think it really started with something as simple as The Moth, where you'd hear people get up and just tell these stories off the cuff. And then you discovered other podcasts. You Must Remember This. That's a great show about classic Hollywood. Cocaine and Rhinestones, terrific show about the history of country music. Of course, there's This American Life, The Kitchen Sisters. And
you just want to spend the rest of the show talking about some other assholes podcasts? What's wrong with you? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
But I kind of started hearing these whispers that, maybe this is something you should check out.
Who was whispering this? Was this whispering to yourself? Was this a whisper in the back of your head saying, hey, maybe you should explore this? Or were there people in your life saying, hey, you're good in front of a microphone. You're a natural storyteller. You've got a cool voice. You should do this. Was it you yourself or was it other people telling you?
It was me, myself. Okay. It was absolutely me, myself. And around this time as well, the YouTube algorithm kept suggesting these travel vlog videos, these travel bloggers. And I would watch them and I would never really see myself reflected in the way that I enjoyed traveling, because it's certainly not the case with all, but with so many of them, it was never really about, let me show you this place. It was much more, look at me and how cute I am in this place. And they would really always kind of hit, the postcard spots. Like someone goes to New York, they'll go by the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building. But the truth is I can tell you, well, that's not really New York. Or, you'd see someone go to San Antonio and hang out at the Alamo. But there's a lot more to San Antonio than the Alamo. I also am old enough to remember Charles Kuralt, who was a great reporter with CBS. He had a program called On the Road, where he would just kind of travel the country and talk to people in the small town. I think that there's been a great void since he left the journalistic landscape, because he would approach people without judgment. He would approach people with great empathy. In an interview once, he said, a reporter's job is to investigate, but that's not what I'm there to do. I'm really just there to enjoy the ride. And I thought to myself, well, if there's one thing that I know, it's that Texas people have great stories and they love to talk. And I thought, well, maybe there's something that I can do here. So back in January of 2020, when it's cold and bitter here in New York, I said to myself, I'm going to head back to Texas and see what I can do here. I didn't have any kind of a grand vision of what it was going to be. It very well could have ended in disaster.
So it still might, man. Keep your chin up.
You never know. But it started as simply as me walking into a bar that I knew in Austin called the Dry Creek, which is an ancient dive. And I thought, let me talk to some of the people there and use this as an opportunity to explore some of the broader history that surrounds this place. Then I went to an old barbecue joint in Austin called Sam's Barbecue, which is in East Austin, one of the last true Black-owned businesses that you will still find in East Austin. Went to a dance hall that I'd never been to before called Sefshik Hall outside of Temple. And I kind of looked at what I had and I said to myself, what is this? And I said, well, what I have here, each episode that I'm putting together is a snapshot of a different place. What is that? That's a postcard. And if there's a through line that all of these places have in common, it's that they're representative of fading histories, cultures, traditions that you don't hear a lot about anymore. And you don't know how much longer they're going to be left. And so that's how Vanishing Postcards has come together. And since then, I've probably covered about 1,500 miles of Texas. You were talking about how the pandemic was challenging for performing. Well, in many ways, this project is very much a product of the pandemic, because I started it as an experiment back in January of 2020, came back to New York, left New York on March 8th for what was to have been a 10-day family vacation to Mexico that then became an extended detour with my parents in Houston. And I ended up in Texas for over a year. And during that time, the circumstances came together for me to really pursue it. So as strange and as trying as 2020, 21 have proven, In a lot of ways, it was made possible by the strange circumstances I found myself in.
So you said at the beginning of that you didn't really have sort of a figurative roadmap of what you were going to do or what this was going to be about. Did you have a literal roadmap? Because you're picking some pretty off the beaten path places. How do you find these places? Do you just stumble upon them? Do you hear about them from one person and then go and then find out about the next thing from that thing? Or how does that happen? How do you pick these places?
A lot of internet rabbit holes and research, really, more than anything else. And what I would do is, although each episode is self-contained and can stand on its own, I like to think that each one really kind of informs the other, and they are kind of in conversation with one another in their own ways. And so really what would happen is I would take a step back and I would say, okay, what do I need now? Do we need some diversity? Well, let's take a trip down to the Rio Grande Valley, to the border, and let's explore conjunto. Let's explore the roots of Texas Mexican cooking. Maybe we need something funny. Who are some wild characters that we can find? As I referenced, I started the series before the pandemic. At that point, I could really just walk into a bar and start talking to people. Obviously, that was no longer possible after the pandemic hit. First of all, because a lot of those places were closed. Second of all, because, I wanted to make certain that I was being respectful of everyone's, health boundaries and whatnot. So it forced me to think about different places that I could go to that might be open, museums, country stores. And as a result, I think that the season is wonderfully diverse as a result of that.
I agree. You mentioned the word season. So in podcasting, of the 2 million podcasts that are out there, it's split up roughly 70% people don't have seasons and 30% do. I think that the difference has to do with a couple of things. I think just a straight regular interview show, I don't think there's a reason to break it up into seasons. It kind of doesn't really make sense unless they're themed. And the other one is the amount of production and editing. So yes, I edit the shit out of my show. I probably spent, now that I'm good at it, I probably spend 6.5 hours editing a 45-minute episode. But your show has a lot more production value to it. You're incorporating some narrative storytelling as you're introing these clips of you having conversations with these people on location. And sometimes maybe you'll even re-record some of your questions on a better microphone, and then insert the clip of the answer. And so I think that's why most people decide either a season or not a season as far as a format. Why did you?
Well, as you said, it's a lot of work. Each episode, if I'm able to devote all of my time and energy to it, we're talking hours of work, days. I want to try to talk to as many people as I can. I might talk to someone for an hour. Out of that hour, I might only use 3 minutes. I think the real challenge as well comes in the writing of each episode. What I'll do is I'll talk to a bunch of people. Then I'll take a step back. First of all, I'll just listen to everyone that I've spoken with, and I'll isolate the nuggets. I'll find what are the good stories that are told. Then you'll take a step back and you'll say, okay, well, what is the broader picture here? What are the issues that people keep bringing up? What's the conflict? Out of that, I piece it all together into a cohesive segment that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it is a very involved process, unless I, someday have the backing of a network and a whole team of people that I can work with. This will always be a seasonal show because of that. I'm also going on location when I am interviewing these people, which is a very important aspect of the series. I want for people to feel as if they're on the road trip with me. And so much of that has to do with the rawness of where you're talking to people. It's just going to be really different talking to someone in a honky tonk where you have, live music in the background versus if you're talking to someone in a studio. So there are a lot of elements at work there. And I think quality control is very important as well. Less is more in that regard.
That makes sense. I don't know if you know, but I know that my listeners don't know. I did say that I listened to your show, but I don't know if I mentioned that I am subscribed and have listened to every single episode. I really enjoy the show. And it seems like my favorite episode changes. like right now, my current favorite episode is the one about peaches in Fredericksburg and Stonewall. And maybe I'm biased. And the reason that is one of my favorite episodes, or my actual favorite episode, is because my wife and I live in Bernie, which is about 45 minutes from the Texas wine country. And we have been members of several different wine clubs out there for about 15 years. And so for 15 years, we've been going out to these different wineries and having a good time and passing all of these peach stands on the side of the road. So you're talking to the people whose last name is on these signs and these stands that I've been seeing by the side of the road for 15 years. It's wonderful storytelling. I love the fact that, like, I didn't know that they didn't used to grow peaches. They used to grow peanuts. And then in, like, I think it was 1922 or something, that all changed because of climate. That made me happy because that means that climate change didn't just happen yesterday. And so they found their niche in peaches and peaches. But then also you mentioned what's actually going on there, which is the takeover of all of these vineyards and wineries. And you said something like, I lost count at 32. Let me tell you, sir, you lost count way at the beginning because there's something like 180 wineries and vineyards in that area. They do call themselves the Texas wine country. But more important than that, they let everybody know that the Texas Hill Country is the second most visited wine destination in America next to Napa. Also, I couldn't stop laughing when you were vaguely describing some of these encroaching wineries. You said, making way for wineries with tasting rooms built to look like castles. And that made me laugh because my wife and I were full case club member number 1 for that winery. That was a part of a family that had a different winery, and then it was like 4 brothers, and they got into a tiff, so much so that they actually cropped one of the brothers out of the photo that's in the other winery. And so that guy said, well, fuck y'all, I'm going to go start my own thing. And that's the Castle. And then the other one that you mentioned, that was the second wine club we ever joined. So we've been a member of that wine club for 15 years. And they affectionately refer to themselves as Tuscany in Texas. So I listened to it, when I was home vacuuming or whatever I was doing, and I was just like, this is fucking amazing. And so this past weekend, my wife and I were like, hey, we haven't been out to the Texas wine country in a while. Let's go, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I've got the perfect thing to listen to on the way. And she fell in love. So goodness. We really, really enjoyed listening to your show. I sent you a picture of me and her from the Vogel Orchard roadside stand. It was a lot of fun. I like I said, I love your show.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
You know those popping phone handle things that you see on everyone's phones nowadays? Well, how would you like to put your logo on them? Does your podcast or band need new merch? Do you want to bring attention to your new book or film? Maybe you need something unique for your Patreon or crowdfunding campaign. Then visit thelogopop.com, where you can customize them with the logo of your podcast, band, business, art, school mascot, or whatever else you can think of. These are way more affordable than you may think at thelogopop.com. Mention where you heard this ad and get free shipping on your entire order. Remember, that's thelogopop.com to order your custom popping phone handles. That's thelogopop.com.
Let's get back into it.
Some of the things that you talk about make me want to put them on a list of places to go visit. A couple of months ago, I think I told you off air, my wife and I were watching a TV show that was basically Texas barbecue. Every episode, I was in my phone just taking notes. I'm like, that city, that place, okay, great. And that one, okay, great. And so a few weeks ago, we did this trip to West Texas. We went to Marathon and Marfa and Terlingua, and we hit those specific barbecue places that we saw on that TV show, and they were phenomenal. And as a matter of fact, we're going to do it again this weekend. But your show, given that it's sort of a postcard format, I guess, it makes me want to go visit those places, but not just to see those places, but to see if I can find those people. Mm-hmm. Because much like the places, those people are vanishing also. And I think it's a really, really great idea for you to not only highlight these pieces of Texas history and Texas heritage, but also the people that have made it those things.
Absolutely.
Like, that dance hall wouldn't be around if people for generations didn't go there. You talked to a lady, I think it was one of the Vogel Peach ladies. She met her husband on the dance floor at Luckenbach 70 years ago or whatever. I mean, what? Like, these are just some of the most beautiful and amazing stories. And this is none of my business. Take this in the spirit in which it is intended. But I think a really cool bonus or side project for Vanishing Postcards, and I know you have tons of audio, would be for you to focus on some of the people, sort of maybe a bonus. Like you did a bonus about one of the dudes, a singer or a musician.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it'd be a really cool 15-minute bonus episode just to hear about how that lady and that man met. Like, tell their love story. Tell their love story from Luckenbach.
Oh, sure.
Anyway, so I just... that kind of stuff.
But I think what you hit on there is that people have defined this show as a travel podcast, which is perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. But I really do think that it is much more of a people podcast that's the result of my travels. It's really about the people. And I think something that I want for people to take from this is, every time some kind of an old institutional business closes, you will have all sorts of people come out of the woodwork going, oh my goodness, this is the worst thing ever. This is just terrible. But you have to realize that, first of all, my question is, well, when was the last time you went there and supported these places? Because it is so much, these people, all of the people I talk to are working so hard. It is so much work to keep these places going. People need to be aware of that. Vera's Backyard Barbecue, a place that I profile in Brownsville, has received huge, attention around the world because he is the last man who's legally allowed to cook barbacoa as it was intended in a pit under the ground. He's received a lot of coverage, but too few have focused on how hard this guy works, how much labor is involved in what he does. And I asked him, I'm like, so, do you see your kids picking this up? He's like, actually, no, you can't fault that.
It's fucking hard, man.
Exactly. Unless there is an apprentice somewhere with some masochistic tendencies, when Mondo decides to call it quits, I mean, that's pretty much it. And I think it's important for people to have an awareness of the labor that goes into all of this.
I love it. I think it's wonderful to highlight the people and the places. It's just fantastic. I know that this trip was kind of like, this whole season was based on basically one long trip, right? Mm-hmm. One long, get away from Manhattan and do your thing. Is that how you're going to do it? Are you going to periodically just bounce from Manhattan and hang out in Texas for a while and get
yeah, that's what the plan and the hope is. I had the luxury of making this a full-time job. The challenge is finding a way to continue doing that because it is so much work. I really do have to focus and do that. I joke that I'm treating it as my grad school experience, but the plan is, come October, it's my hope to hit the road again. The plan is to expand the map beyond Texas for season 2.
Gross.
And it is, I know, but Texas is a canvas I will always come back to. I will always come back to Texas no matter what. There are Texas stories that I will be doing in season 2. Okay. The plan right now for season 2 is I'm going to hit the road. I'm going to drive Route 66 from Oklahoma to California. And I'm going to collect oral histories along the way, profile a lot of the people and places you can still find cruising along the Mother Road. And the concept of this show, although season 1 is entirely Texas based, it is entirely universal because every place is dealing with growth and change. Doesn't matter if it's New York, Tokyo, London, Dublin, San Francisco, wherever. I could easily do a season of Vanishing Postcards in New York City. And something that I take great honor is people have discovered the show in the United Kingdom and Australia. I really have heard from people all over the world telling me about how much, they relate to and enjoy these stories. And it warms my heart greatly. It really does.
Well, it should. These people and these stories and the storytelling craftsmanship that you are using really do make these not only digestible, but relatable. I've never farmed anything in my fucking life, but I felt like I have worked hard at different things, and I felt like I know what it's like to put your everything into something, and sometimes it doesn't turn out. So listening to those peach farmers' stories was breaking my heart. My wife almost cried when, after that dude spent all that money and time renting a helicopter all night long, a couple months later, hail just knocked it all out. She was like, "Oh my God, this is the worst thing ever." So like I said, neither one of us have ever farmed, but those stories are so impactful and they're told in such a great way that I agree with all of those people from all of those lands who contacted you and said, "Hey, this is some really cool shit and I can relate to it." So you're doing the Lord's work, Evan. I appreciate what you're doing. I will stop listening the moment that you do anything outside of Texas. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So I guess when I asked if season 1 was just this trip, and then what is season 2 going to be? You sort of answered my question, but I guess my real question was, is each season going to be themed around a specific trip? Because I think you said some stuff from Texas is going to incorporate into the second season. So how is all that going to work?
Well, I mean, look, you've got to drive through. If you're driving Route 66, I mean, Route 66 goes through the Panhandle. I've never been to the Panhandle before, so I'm really excited to explore. You're going to hear all about the Big Texan Steakhouse, where people have the competition to, eat that huge,
is that in Lubbock?
Massive Amarillo.
Amarillo, there you go.
The Cadillac Ranch. There are a number of pieces that I will be doing in the Panhandle, but something that frustrates me is because of the pandemic and many circumstances, I was unable to make it out to far west Texas. And, if we're permitted to do so in the near future, I would love to do a piece on Boquillas del Carmen, the border crossing there. I would love to do pieces in Terlingua and Marathon and Balmorhea and all of those places out there. So I really want to find a way to do that. I also would love to do pieces in Mississippi. I mean, Mississippi has an incredible storytelling tradition, greatest literary legacy of any state. And, just incredible traditions exist in Mississippi. It's a place where the past is always invading the present. I could just have a field day with that. So we're just going to see where this road and journey takes us. As I said, I mean, I do think that the concept is pretty universal and can be applied to many different aspects. I do see season 2 at this point taking on more of an overarching theme and narrative, perhaps, than season 1. But again, we'll see what happens. The important thing is to find good places and good people and good stories. And I think it's kind of an endless well.
Nice. I did mention that this weekend we're going back to that area where with the good barbecue. We're not going to hit Terlingua this time because that's kind of a little bit out of the way. But we are going to hit Marathon and Marfa and I think Alpine. We're going to go through Del Rio. And on the way, and this is one of the coolest things, and we just found this the last time we went. Because normally we take I-10 because everybody's in a fucking hurry. So we're like, hey, let's go. But this last time we went, we took Highway 90. And Highway 90 was just this cruise. I mean, you got to watch your speed because we probably saw 90 cops. So watch your speed. But it's beautiful. It's serene. There's plenty of very well-maintained rest stops. There's gas everywhere. It's just a non-in-a-hurry kind of a way to get there. And one of the places that we found, it's developed and maintained by the Texas Highway System or the Texas Department of Public Safety or whatever. But it's like public bathrooms and a rest area. But they built it at the scene of the Judge Roy Bean Hanging Tree Saloon. Ooh. Like it's on site, like they bought it. The real saloon is there. His house is there. Oh, and they built this beautiful walk-through cactus garden. And then they built brand new, big, beautiful bathrooms and sort of this little museum that kind of tells the story. And there's, you walk up and push the button and you watch this little, I don't know what they're called, but it's, you look through this thing and you see this little action. It's like a short film or whatever. And it is so beautiful. It's all free. And it's the real one. There's 2 or 3 replicas of the Judge Roy Bean Hanging Saloon all over Texas. There's one in Pecos. But this is the actual real one. And it's in the real place. And I can't remember the name of the town that it's in because he named the town after some girl he was in love with or whatever. But if you're going to go that way, stop. It's amazing. And the people behind the desk, the ladies, they're so knowledgeable and friendly. Like, this would be a really fun thing for you to do. So we did that last time, and we're going to do it again this time.
Well, that sounds like a great trip. And that's exactly what you get when you get off the major interstates, because you can drive I-35 from Dallas to Laredo. Someone could tell you that you're in Ohio, and you probably wouldn't think twice.
That's true.
And I think that if you really want to get your finger on the pulse of a place, you owe it to yourself to do that. It'll take you longer, but it's going to be less stress, and it's going to be infinitely more rewarding. Whenever I have to drive from San Antonio to Houston, instead of driving I-10, I take the back way that'll take you through Hallettsville and all of those towns. And it takes a bit longer, but I don't feel exhausted by the time I get to Houston. And you can stop and pick up kolaches along the way.
Yeah. And part of the reason that, I used to feel just exhausted when I would get to a place is because not only am I fighting traffic, it's so stressful being in the middle of all of that hustle and bustle. And more often than not, a standstill traffic situation. What would you rather see when you're driving down the road? Would you rather see a Chili's that's next to a McDonald's, that's next to a Walmart, or would you rather see the most beautiful canyon you didn't know existed in the state you lived in your whole life? So it's a lot of fun, man.
Amen.
When is season 1 going to wrap up?
Season 1 has 15 episodes. I'm potentially working on kind of an end of season bonus. So it'll be wrapping up in November. And it's my hope to hit the road again come October. I'm doing some research for it as we speak right now. In fact, I'm supposed to be speaking later today with Michael Wallace, who's one of the great living authorities on Route 66. But I want to see if I can get a booster shot before hitting the road, because that's important too. It really is. But I'm hoping come October that I'll be on the road gathering footage, and we'll see where the road and journey takes me.
Fantastic. How often does this show come out?
Basically, it comes out twice a month, really basic, every 2 weeks. By doing it that way, it gives me more time to work on things because, there are always issues that come up, changes that are brought to my attention that need to happen. Sometimes news comes up with some of the places that you have covered. And it also just kind of gives me more time to promote an audience build by doing that. It gives me longer to kind of milk PR opportunities with each episode. Audience building is very important and crucial to me, and just kind of gives me more time to ensure that the work is heard by doing it that way.
Understood. So listeners, the show comes out every other week, and it's plus or minus about a half hour. This is not Joe Rogan's 3-hour podcast. So it's digestible. Even if you have a short commute, it's still digestible. Like I said, I was listening to the episode about peaches in Fredericksburg while I was vacuuming my house. Where is it available?
So, you're listening to a podcast right now. I am quite confident that wherever you are listening to Fascination Street, you should be able to find Vanishing Postcards. Apple, Spotify, Breaker, Castbox, Stitcher. You can find Vanishing Postcards wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever podcasts are sold. Okay, let's see here. Vanishing Postcards. It's available everywhere, every other week or so. It's about a half hour. Season 1 is going to end roughly November, probably. Mm-hmm. Season 2 is going to start
hopefully February. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
Sure.
Not going to commit to anything at this point, but February is what I'm aiming for.
That's fantastic. Evan, where can we find you on social media?
Instagram, Vanishing Postcards. I keep the Instagram account pretty active. It's a really great companion for the series. You can see a lot of the people and the places that are featured by following the show there. So just search Vanishing Postcards on Instagram. Also, vanishingpostcards.com. We have some additional resources there, and it's a great way that you can stay in touch with me.
Nice. What about you personally?
Sure. I have my own Instagram, Evan Stern NYC. So if you want to see some more of personal day-to-day, you can find me there too. That's perfectly fine.
Sweet. Well, Evan Stern from Vanishing Postcards, as we're heading out, is there anything that I didn't ask you or we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, if I have to say anything, I don't think that I articulated Charles Kuralt particularly well earlier in the conversation. But I think without, explicitly saying it, I think that one of the great accomplishments of his show is that it really kind of focused on issues that unite us. And, we're living in a horribly divided, horribly polarized moment right now. But I really do think that culture is one of the rare areas of agreement in this country right now. Culture provides opportunity for shared experience. And, I don't think that anything that we've lived through over the past 5-6 years should be normalized at all. I'll be the first to say that. But it is my hope that a lot of the divisions that we're wrestling with are something of an illusion. And it is my hope that this series can play a small role in showcasing some of the beauty that we share in common. If we can't appreciate what is good and beautiful about our small towns and rural communities, how can we expect them to appreciate what is good and beautiful about places like New York City and Austin and San Francisco? So that's really kind of what part of the aim of this show is, I think.
I would agree, but I would also add that not just how can they appreciate our places if we don't appreciate theirs, but also the people. Like you said, there's all this difference about, people from Texas this, or people from New York that, or people from California that. Man, we're all just people. There's people everywhere. There's purple people here. There's purple people there. Everybody's people. So I agree with you, what you said. Yeah. It's about the culture, the places, and the people. And I know that your show is not particularly a travel show, quote unquote. But somebody real smart a long time ago said that the best thing that we can do to promote inclusivity and diversity and understanding is to travel. Get out of your town, go meet people, go see some other culture, go see some other shit. And I think that your show helps people do that.
Yes. I think it might have been Mark Twain. He said something to the fact that, travel was a great antidote to prejudice, which is something I agree with. But at the same time, too, I also do want to encourage people to look at the culture that is in their own backyard. Because I think so often when we think of culture, we're taught to think about places like the Met and the Louvre and the Prado. But some of the greatest art and culture comes from places that, Detroit gave us Motown. Clarksdale, Mississippi gave us the blues. Some of the best art in the world comes from places that, aren't visited and are sometimes neglected. So, that's something else important to think about as well.
Robert Johnson's Crossroads album was recorded in San Antonio.
Sure was. Minger Hotel.
I mean, it's the least likely places for the coolest shit. And I know you attributed that quote to Mark Twain, but I really thought it was Samuel Clemens. My bad. All right. Well, Evan Stern, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and your hectic Manhattan lifestyle to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you, Steve. Thank you so much. It means the world.
Absolutely. My pleasure. It was a lot of fun, and don't think I'm going to be unsubscribing anytime soon, my friend, because I really enjoy your show. So thank you for bringing that into my life.
Thank you so much.
And you have a great rest of your week, man.
You got it, brother. Take care, man.
Take it easy.
Stay well. Bye.
Bye. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2001 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is from the song Say My Name off the 2021 album Underdog Anthems, used with permission from Jack's Hollow. If you like the show, tell a friend. Subscribe and rate and review the show on iTunes and wherever else you download podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the episodes are available there as well. Check me out on Vero at Fascination Street Pod and TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And again, thanks for listening.